All right, so I hope my voice is audible and you guys are able to see my screen. If you have any difficulties in hearing my voice or difficulties in seeing my screen, please do let us know by uh, putting your comment here. Uh, Again, I kept everyone on mute just to avoid any disturbance during the session. If you have any queries or questions in the middle of the session, any questions or any doubts, you can feel free to comment out here in the session. I'll be watching watching all the chat window here, and then I try to answer the whatever the queries you have it. Right. So today's session is going to be on the basically I am looking at the demonstration of switchover activity. Switchover activity for your RAC database. That's precisely 2-node production database with a 2-node standby database. That's what I'm going to do it switchover or the switchback, or you can do a failover. Anything we can show it on this demo's perspective. The agenda is going to be I'm briefly explain about what is the difference between your standalone and the RAC database in comparison with your DataGuard environment setup. And then I'm quickly review about a 2-node production database with a 2-node DR setup, what I have it in my lab environment. And then I can give some differentiation between your what is switchover or what is failover. And then we can quickly jump into the demo part. So if I want to explain a basic comparison between my standalone and the RAC production and DR setup. So your standalone is going to be your single server setup. That's a single node, and this is going to be your prod server. I can say this is your standalone prod server, and your standby is going to be a single node. That is going to be your DR server. You can call it as any name. That's a OS name, and you will be running your production database over here. That's your prod DB. I can simply say that prod DB, and this prod database might be running in your ESM or in your local file system or any of the NFS or NAS or SAN, whatever the file system, this database will be running on that particular storage. And if you want to do a DR setup for the standalone, it's going to be one single node, and you will be running your a single database here. I can say this is going to be my DR database. I can simply say that this as a DRDB. DRDB. And then what's the comparison between your production database and the standalone database? If I can simply talk about the naming convention of my production database and the standalone database, usually you can see your DB underscore name and DB underscore unique underscore name and instance underscore name. All right, so these are like typically 3 names what you see at your production database, and the same name goes to your DR database as well, like DB underscore name and DB underscore unique underscore name. Sorry for that typo. And then you will be having your instance name. Instance underscore name. So if I can just give a comparison between my prod DB in your production database, whatever the prod database name is going to be same as your DB name, prod DB, and then the DB unique name is also going to be same as your prod DB, and then your instance name is going to be same as your prod DB. That typically is going to be same. All 3 names, DB name, DB unique name, and instance name are going to be same when it comes to the production server. Or the same setup when it goes to your DR database. Your DB name is always derived from your production database. Your DB name is always coming from your production database name. So in your DR site, your DB name is going to be same as your prod database name. That is a mandatory parameter because you are going to clone or you are going to build your DR database from your production database. So this is going to be your prod DB. This is same as your primary database name, and you can have a unique name and instance name whatever you want. Like I can go with a DRDB, and then instance name also I can go with a DRDB, and then you can switch. You can start a log shipping between your prod and DR, and that's going to be in sync with your production database. This is a typically structure when it comes to the standalone. And if I compare the same setup with my RAC environment, typically I'll be having a multiple RAC node, like 2-node RAC or 3-node RAC, whatever the RAC nodes I have it based upon my grid setup. So I'll be having my DR database, and then I'll be having my production database, and both the production instance will be running from my shared storage, that is my disk group. I can say that data disk group and the reco disk group. This is going to be my data, and this is going to be my reco. Reco is for my archive logs and redo logs and control files. I can keep it on my reco disk group. And these two disk groups are basically the combination of, or the group of my ASM disks or the raw disks. And then my instance, like I'll be running here. If I take a same database name like prod.db, I'll be running my instance here as a prod db1, and then similarly I'll be running my instance as a prod db2, and these two instances are accessing my common shared storage disk groups, so that if in case of any one instance goes down, automatically other instance will be able to access my common shared disk groups. Like if I lose my this particular node 1, and this node 2 will be able to access my disk groups, and then it will be able to access my data. So that's a concept of RAC. Everyone knows, everyone we are aware of that one, right? And similarly, the setup will goes to same manner when it comes to the DR. So I'll be having again a 2-node RAC, a 2-node DR setup, or 3-node, or single node, or 4-node. There is no restriction on that. You can go with the n number of production database, and you can go with the n number of DR nodes. So there is no dependency between each of these prod and DR. In case of RAC, you can have single node production and 2-node RAC, and you can have a 2-node RAC and the single node DR. So there's the mismatch combination. You can go with any combination when it comes to the RAC database, RAC production database versus RAC DR database. So again, the storage is going to be common storage. You can go with your data or reco, whatever name you can give here. Data, again, I can go with the data or FRA or reco, whatever name I can give. And again, these are like, again, combination of my ASM disk or the raw disk. Out of this disk, I can form these disk groups. And then here, if the name, I can take it as same as the DRDB, and the instance is going to be DRDB1 here, DRDB1, and then on the other node, it's going to be DRDB2. Right. So, and then again, these two DR instance will be able to access my shared disks, so that in any case any one instance goes down, other instance will be accessing my shared storage here. Right. So and then one of the interesting part here, right? Here it's a one-to-one mapping, one instance, and the DR also one instance, and you're going to start your MRP process on this node, and all your archive logs are going to sit here, and then it's going to be in sync with your production database. And in case of 2-node production database to 2-node RAC database, and where you are going to start your MRP, are you going to start MRP on node 1, or are you going to start your MRP on node 2, or you are going to start your MRP process on both the nodes? So the simple answer is you are going to start the MRP on any one of the nodes. For example, if you do alter system manage standby database, recover from current log file, or whatever the command, you can run it on node 1, and whatever the logs, archive logs are generated by one instance or archive log generated by second instance, both will ship to common storage, and my instance 1 is going to apply those archive logs. Any one instance is going to be running with your MRP process. The other one will be in idle state. Right, so that's a typical structure between your 2-node production database and 2-node RAC. And when it comes to the same name, DB name, in case of RAC, again, 3 important names: DB underscore name, DB underscore unique underscore name, and instance underscore name. And the same 3 naming convention goes to your DR database as well. In case of this particular setup, the DB name is going to be prod DB. I'm just going to put here prod DB, and then DB unique name is also going to be same as your prod DB, and the instance name is going to be your prod DB1 and prod DB2 here. Right, so this is your typically the naming convention for your production database, and on the DR side, the same goes to your DB name is derived from your production database name, because your DR database is built out of your production database. So your DB name is always point to your production database. So your DB name is going to be same as your prod DB here. I'll just put it here as a prod DB, and the DB unique name, you can have it any name here. I can go with the DRDB here, DRDB, and then your instance name is going to be your DR. Again, instance name you can go with anything here, DRDB1, and you can go with the DRDB2, or any instance name you can provide it here. So this is going to be your typical structure in case of rack to rack production and DR setup. So I have a couple of questions here. Is it allowed to build a DR on a cross-platform? For example, yes, it is allowed to build. You can refer. There's a particular mass note I'm going to share after this session. You can build your production on your Windows, and you can build your DR on Linux. The cross-platform DR setup is allowed, but there's only limited platforms are available here. You cannot build any platform to any platform. Oracle has given some of the platform cross-platform DR setup. You can build it. I can. There's a mass note I can share after this particular session. Right. So if I come here in my particular environment, I have here my production database. That is my RAC 12C. I have my particular blog I written here. This is a 12C DataGuard switchover 2-node RAC database switchover steps. So if you refer this particular blog, it particularly talks about whatever I'm going to explain in this today's session. So I have a 2-node RAC, that is my RAC 12C is my production database. I'm going to do sructl status database -d RAC 12C, which is running under node 1 and node 2. These are two nodes, a 2-node production setup here. The instance are RAC 12C1 and RAC 12C2. These are the two instances, and the database name is RAC 12C, and database unique name is also going to be RAC 12C. If I can put this naming convention here, typically it's going to be my production DB name is going to be RAC 12C here, and then my DB unique name is also going to be RAC 12C, and my instance names are going to be RAC 12C1 and RAC 12C2. These are my production database setup here. And if I go to my DR setup, I have my DR setup RAC standby. If I say sructl status database -d and RAC standby, that's going to be my DR. I can make my DR sessions with the red color here just to differentiate. So if I say sructl status database -d RAC standby, this is going to be my RAC standby, which is running under Oracle node 1 and Oracle node 2. And the instance name are going to be RAC standby 1 and RAC standby 2. So I'm just going to put this one in this particular slide just to make it difference. The DB nickname is going to be RAC standby, and the instance name is going to be RAC standby 1 and RAC standby 2. And the DB name is going to be derived from my production database name, that's going to be RAC 12C. If I can connect to my instance here, SQL plus /sysdba, show parameter DB underscore name, that's going to be your production database name here. That is, that is coming from your production database name. So that's a DR setup in case of standalone, or in case of RAC setup. Your DB name is always coming from your production database name. Right. So this is the typical combination. This is the typical setup. What you can have it in your production database name as well as your RAC database name. So that's the typical architecture how it looks. That's the first point. What I wanted to give a clear understanding on standalone and the RAC database, how the differentiation works. And this is a quick review of my current RAC setup. So it is running with a 2-node RAC, 2-node production database. I can say srvctl config database -d and then database name. That will give a configuration of my RAC 12C production database. You can see DB unique name and DB name, and what is your Oracle home, and what is your the Oracle owner, and where is your SP file, and where is your password file, and what is the start option and shutdown option, and this is the role primary, and these groups are data and reco, and the type is RAC database, and the database instance are RAC instance, RAC 12C1, RAC 12C2, and configured nodes, my cluster nodes are node 1 and node 2. Right. Same thing if I go to my DR and do srvctl config database -d, and then I can give my DB unique name. So my DB unique name is going to be RAC 12C, and database name is RAC standby, RAC SB, and then my Oracle home and Oracle owner and where is SP file, and I kept my password file locally, so I'm not going to see it here in this configuration. And it's a physical standby database, and which is mounted on my data and record disk group, and the database type is RAC, and RAC standby 1 and RAC standby 2, and which is running under my Oracle node 1 and node 2. So this is a typical configuration of my both prod and DR setup. So I can simply take one more session. I can connect to my production database here, and I can show simply I can check my alert log, show parameter dump, and then I can go to my alert log here. I have one more session. This is my node 1 and node 2, and then I took one more session here. I can simply go to my alert log location here, and then I can tail my alert log. So whenever you are doing a switchover or failover, like you always tail your alert log so that you can understand what's going on with your each and every command. I'm going to tail my alert log here, node 1 alert log. Right. So I'm going to connect to my DR database here, and I'm going to do show parameter dump. You can say show parameter dump, which will tell you C dump location, and you can go to that alert log. So this is your alert log location. I'm just going to go here, RAC standby, and I'm going to do tail -f alert log. So I have to go back one directory. CD trace is my alert log location. Tail -f alert log. Right. So this is both are like your DR alert log and then your production alert log. You made it here, and now you can come to actual the switchover steps. So I can pause it here, and there's a couple of questions in the chat window. I can just try to answer them. DB name must be same as in RAC primary and server. That's true, Rehan. Like your DB name is always coming from your DB name is always coming from your production database name. So whenever you are building a standalone DR setup or the RAC DR setup, your DB name is always coming from your production database name. Otherwise, your DR will not be in sync with your production database if you change your DB name. And then DB unique name must be different. So it's not mandatorily different, but it's better to you cannot keep it as the same as your production database name, because DB unique name itself suggests unique. So that is a unique between each and every database. You cannot keep it as the same as your production database name. So your DB unique name should be it should be different, and it should be unique to that particular database. So it should not be same as your production database name. And then there's a few more questions. I have 2 node 11G rack on VirtualBox VL5. Disk groups are data and FRA. Okay, that's good. I want to upgrade GI and 19C. Also want to migrate. So again, Rehan, this is a different topic. Migration and upgradation, we will talk it later. But purely this particular topic is talks about my rack database switchover or failover activities. And Kaif is asking auxiliary database invalid username and password. So definitely there's an issue with your the password file. That is again a different topic, how to build your standby database. In order to build your standby database, you have to copy your production password file to your DR database, your DR servers, and you have to build your DR database. And once you build your DR database, you have to keep your both production and DR password files in sync. Whenever you change your password at your production database, you have to immediately copy that password file to your DR servers, so that your DR will be in catch up all the archive logs. If there's a password mismatch between your production and DR server, and your DR database is going to be gonna out of sync, and it's not going to be applied any of the archive logs. You usually see that username and password, invalid username and password. This kind of error message you can see it here. So, okay, Majid is asking one more question. Can we keep password file and SP file in the local file system? Of course, Majid, like you can keep your password files and SP file locally, but it's recommended to keep under your disk group. Otherwise, if you keep it both password file if you keep your SP file locally on each nodes, and if you do any changes on node 1 and that and then if you try to bounce your database, your node 2 will not be going to start, because whatever the changes you did it here in this node 1, that will be locally on that particular SP file, and you have to manually copy that SP file to other node. So it is not. There's not, nobody will stopping you to keep your password file locally, but advisable thing is to keep your SP file commonly on your disk groups, so that both the instance can able to access the common SP file. And same thing goes to your password file. If you keep the password file under any of the disk group, and both the instance can able to access, and whatever the password change activity you do, and it will reflect on both the instances. If you keep the password file on both the instances locally, and if you change the password on this particular node, and if you change the password file on node 1, that will not be reflected on the node 2, and you will not be able to connect to node 2 using that particular password file, because the password in this particular server will be having a old password file. But you can keep the password file and SP file locally, but that is not advisable. It's always best recommendation to keep it on a shared storage, that is on your data disk group and record disk group. So if you go here, this particular production database, my SP file is on record disk group and my password file is on my data disk group. So which is under shared location, both instance can able to access the same password file and same SP file. If I do any changes on this particular password file from node 1, that will immediately reflect on the node 2 as well. And if I do any changes from the node 2, immediately that can be reflected on my node 1, if I keep it both are in the shared storage on my data or record disk group. Right. So Manjunath is asking, when we configure DataGuard setup, do you need to remove DG file? Do you need to remove file, DG file in ASM? What file you are talking about? DG file? Is it are you talking about the password file, or are you talking about the SP file? For example, if I have my production database here, RAC 12C, and then I have my DR setup here, and if you do drop this particular DR setup here, and if you want to reconfigure your DR setup here, you have to clean up all your previous password file and the previous SP file, everything you have to clean up, and you have to do fresh installation, fresh configuration. And then if there's one more question from Hugo, if there is a sync issue between the standby, I used to kill archive process. Yes. So if there is a sync issue between your prod and DR, sometimes you have to stop your MRP process from your DR setup, and you have to restart your MRP process from your DR setup. And then you have to find out what is the root cause between your root cause for your sync issue, whether it's a network issue, or whether it's your FRA is full, or whether there's a password file mismatch, or what is the bottleneck, why your DR is getting out of sync. You have to first figure out what is the root cause, and then take appropriate action. And then when your archive process are stuck, or when the archive process are not applying on your DR side, one of the easiest method is to just to stop your MRP on your DR side and restart your MRP, and automatically it will catch those missing or stuck archive logs. Right. So one more question: we keep the password file on shared storage, then it may give some error in case of when need to connect to remotely. Obviously, like it's not gonna give any error if you keep it in a shared location. If you can give me any particular error message, what error message you are getting, because this is one of the recommendation by Oracle itself. You have to keep your password file in the shared storage. So that's one of the recommendation or the best practice. But again, nobody is stopping you. You can keep it wherever you want, whether it's in a shared storage or local file system. You can keep it, no issue in that. Right. So that's about how the two-node production and two-node DR setup works, and the comparison between your standalone and RAC. And then let's understand the switchover and failover activities, how it works. I explained many times about this DataGuard switchover and failover activities, but again, I'm going to give you one more time brief idea on that. Whenever you are doing a switchover, your typical configuration looks like this: your production database and the standby database, and your production database is in Chicago, and your standby database is in Boston. And always the log ship happens between your prod to DR from Chicago to Boston. And when you do a switchover, what you are going to do, you are going to convert your production as a standby and your standby as a production. And in that case, Chicago become your standby database, and your Boston become your production database. And the log shipping happens in a reverse direction from Boston to Chicago. So earlier it was happening from Chicago to Boston, and when you do a switchover, that's going to be the log shipping happens in a reverse direction. And then this is the one of the major activity in most of the IT industry. They will do it on yearly. They will call it as a Drdl activity. Some organization they will do it on half yearly, and some organization they will do it on yearly basis. So they will typically call it as a Drdl activity. And what happens to in case of failover? If something goes to your production data center, which is in Chicago data center, and some disaster happens, some earthquake or the fire or whatever happens at your data center, and you lost your data center completely, your production database is gone, and then immediately you have to cut down your logship. Obviously, logship will be stopped, and you have to immediately convert your standby database as a production database. That is called a failover. Once you make the failover and you are treating this, whatever the standby database, you are making it as a primary database. And then once this primary database is ready, and you can reroute all the application to this primary database. And later in the down the line, you can create a standby database for this newly created production database. That's a kind of a failover. So failover in the sense you are completely removing your production database, and you're going to be deleting that entire database from your cut down that entire production database from your database. So assuming that this database never comes back online. So that's a scenario that they will call it as a failover. So typically this will happen whenever there's a disaster scenario like earthquake or fire at your production database center. Right. So these are like typically the failover. Nobody will do it because this is not the regular activity until unless there's a major issue from your data center, like disaster happens, then you do a failover. Like, but this switchover activity, that's a common activity in most of the IT industry. They will call it as a Drdl activity, and then they will perform it on half yearly or on annual basis, that Drdl activity. Right. So coming to this switchover activity, like, this is my blog. I precisely mentioned what are the steps involved here. And the switchover activity basically contain these 9 steps. Uh, you know, uh, First is like, cancel and apply. Okay, this you can read it whenever you want. I just quickly go through. I'll just explain my production environment, that is RAC 12c, and having 2 node instances running on 2 nodes, 2 node cluster, and this is my 12c Oracle home. And same thing goes to my DR RAC 12c, 2 node instances, and running under 2 node cluster database and 12c Oracle home. And then I already showed you my configuration here, and I can just verify my database mode on my production database. So this is my RAC 12c, which is in read write and which is in a primary role. The same command, if I run it on my DR site, it's going to be in a standby read only with apply, and it's a physical standby mode. That's the comparison between your prod and DR. And then you can verify your MRP process, which is running or not, by using this particular command, Vdll manage standby, where process like MRP, that will tell you whether the MRP process is running or not. So if I run it here on node DR node 1, so MRP is running here. And if I connect to my other node here, RAC standby 2, and if I connect to my other instance, my DR instance, if I run the same command, so here there's no MRP on second node, because I started my MRP on node 1. As I said here, you are going to start your MRP process any one of the node. You're not going to start your MRP process on all the nodes, all the cluster, all the RAC nodes on your RAC DR database. Any one of the node, you are going to start your MRP process. That's one of the caveat here. Right. So on the node 2, I don't have any MRP process. Only on the node 1, I'm running my MRP process. This is like red color indicates my DR nodes. So that's other thing you can verify it. And then you can execute the below statement on the primary and check whether the real-time apply is in progress or not. Like you can verify that log archive just2, and it say manage real-time apply. So which is one of the mandatory requirement in case of RAC setup. Your DR should be always in real-time apply. Whenever you are doing a switchover or failover, your production and DR always should be in the real-time apply. And you can verify with this one, dest_2 with the Vdll archive log status, which will tell you whether it's a real-time apply or not. And if it's not a real-time apply, you can do this alter database, manage record standby database using current log file. If you use this particular keyword using current log file, that's a real-time apply. You have to run this particular command on your DR site. If you run this particular command, that will tell you, that will make your DR in real time apply. So it's already, I started with the real-time apply, so I'm not going to run it. And then verify both the DR database are in sync or not using this particular query. So I'm just going to run this particular command here on my production site. Right. So here, if you can see, my latest archive log sequence are like 4818, which is already applied at my DR site. If I run the same command at my DR site, if I go to DR node 1 and if I run it, you can see 4818 is already applied on my DR site. So both my prod and DR is already in sync. So if there's a gap, you have to wait for that both prod and DR to become sync. If there's a gap between both the prod and DR, you will not be able to do a switch over. Make sure that your latest archive logs are applied at your DR side. If you see a applied status equal to yes, that's a 4818, which is applied, and already your DR is sent acknowledgement to your production. 4818 is already in applied state here. Right, so that's other thing. And then you can do if that's the one thing. And there's some questions from Majid and other guys. Vigo is asking, so killing the archive process in prod is the same as restarting MRP process. It is not exactly killing the archive log process at your production site. Instead of killing your archive log process at your production site, you are going to disable your. I have, like, at the end of this particular session, I in this particular slide, I mentioned a couple of some useful commands. Instead of killing your archive log process in the production site, you're going to do this one. Log archive destination 2, you make it differ, and that will disable your archive log shipping between prod and DR, and then you can enable that archive log shipping. This is one of the best practice. Rather than killing the processes, you can do this disable and enable at your production site. And then at the same time, on the DR site, you can do alter manage recovered standby database. You can cancel it and you can restart your MRP process. Either you can do this one at your DR site, or at your production site, you can defer your log architect to and enable it back. So whenever you are facing some log shipping issue, or MRP was struck or hung or unable to apply at your DR site, you can use these two steps, because these are like online activity, doesn't need any downtime. You can do it on fly. There's some more question. Do you need to keep one instance down when you are doing? No, you cannot keep any instance down. If you see here, right, my both the instances are running here. My both DR instance 1 and DR instance, both the instances are running here. And then I started MRP process on node 1. My other node is just idle. So if you bring it down, also fine. If you don't bring it down, also fine. So there's no dependency on other node. You can start all the instances and you can start MRP on only one node. Or if you want to start only one instance and start your MRP on that particular node. All right. So, okay, what is, can we generate some more archive and apply now? Yeah, definitely we can do it. We can generate. We'll see that on even after doing a switch over, we'll do some of archive switch here. Right. So that's where are we? Yeah, that's some of the checks you have to do it. Your production check and your standby check, you can do it, and make sure that your production is in sync with your DR and your DR in sync with your production, and make sure that your production and DR is in real time apply. And then if it's not in sync, you can do cancel the apply and do this alter database recover manage standby database cancel, and you can use this alter database recover manage standby using current log file. If you do using current log file, that's a real time apply. And if there's any gap between your prod and DR, that's going to be catched up, and both your prod and DR should be in sync. Make sure that your both and prod and DR are in sync and proceed further. And then one of the very, very important step is create a guarantee restore point. So why you are going to create a guarantee restore point? In case of any issue happen in the middle of switchover or failover, you can easily go back to that restore point, and you can that's a safest point. You can create it. But I'm not going to create this guarantee restore point because it's my lab environment. I'm not going to do it. So just to create your guarantee restore point, and then you can proceed further, but I'm not going to do that guarantee restore point. Right, so on the DR side, stop MRP process and then create a guarantee restore point. The steps to how to create your guarantee restore point: alter database, recover, manage standby database, cancel, create a guarantee restore point, and then start your MRP process. I'm not going to do this. I'm going to skip this one here. And the same thing, you can come back to your production site and create your guarantee restore point. Create a restore point, whatever point name, restore point name you can provide here. And then these two steps, like optional, it left to you whether you can create. But best recommendation is to create your restore point before you go with the switchover or failover. Right. So the step 5 is very important. Alter database switchover RAC standby verify. So if this verify command is successful, that means your 100% guarantee that your switchover is going to be successful. If there's any issue between log shipping or log sync between your prod and DR, everything will be discovered in this particular verify command. So command is simple: alter database switchover to your standby database name and verify. So if you do it on your production site, that will give indication whether you are able to do a clean switchover or not. Alter database switchover to RAC standby verify. So you can see it on your alert log as well. Alter database switchover to RAC standby verify, which will do a lot of checks internally, and then that will give you a result whether any warnings or any errors, whether you can able to do a clean switchover or not. It's taking some time, and then you can verify it at your DR alert log as well. The media recovery is waiting for thread 2 sequence number 4762 in transit. Right, so let it go. It will take some time internally to check. There's a few more questions. In the environment heavy OLTP activities, there are some prerequisites for the Drdl activities. Yes, so in case of there are a lot of heavy OLTP activities, and if there's a active transactions at your production database side, you will not be able to do any switchover or failover. So your all the active transactions have to be disconnected. At the moment you run this particular switchover verify command, that will give you whether you will be able to do a failover. Like it will give you a error message saying that there's a lot of active transaction at your production site. You have to wait that active transaction to complete. Right. So we got some succeeded with warning message, and it is indicating us to check the alert log for more details. If I go to my alert log here, okay, it says switchover target apply lag. So this is my lab environment. I know there's some network issue between my prod and DR, and it's saying some lag. The apply taking more than 300 seconds to apply my RK logs, and that's the lag I have with my prod and DR. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to do some log switch here, and I'm going to do some stop my MRP and then start my MRP on my DR side. Alter system switch log file. So this is my lab environment. I know like there's some network issue between my prod and DR. So sometimes my both prod and DR having some network connectivity issue, and then it will go out of more than 300 seconds. So that's a thing, like it started applying here. Right, let's verify the log shipping now, the sync status between prod and DR. I can run this command here on my prod side. So it is 4824, and here on my DR site, 4824, right? It's not yet applied here. Let's run one more time your verify command. Where is that verify? Here it is. Right, so alter database successfully altered. You can see on the alert log also. Switchover verify request completed successfully. So you are good to proceed further. So when you got this particular error message, when I ran the first time, I got that warning. So when there's a warning or error message, you should not able to proceed further. succeeded with this warning, and that warning message says my lag between my prod and DR is more than 300 seconds. So then I did a couple of logs and then my prod and DR is in sync now. So that's a successful message. You have to get it, and now you can do this switchover status at your production site, and it says to standby. And the same command, if you run it on your DR site, it says not allowed until unless if you convert your production site, your DR will not show any status here. That's the expected output. And if there's some who's asked that question, Rihan asked that question, right? If there's a heavy OLTP operation, the moment you run this select switchover status from Drdl database, it says active sessions are in progress. So you have to wait that all the active sessions to complete. If there's the active session, you cannot do a switchover. You have to wait for that active session to complete. Okay, that's next thing. And then before you do a switchover, you have to shut down your instance too. In your production site, I'm going to do srvctl stop instance, RAC 12c and RAC 12c2. Instance 2, I'm going to shut down my instance 2 here. I'm going to run it again, the status command here. And then I'm going to do this stop instance 2. Like you can see, like both instance 1 is running on node 1, instance 2 is running on node 2. I'm doing srvctl stop instance, RAC 12c, instance 2. I'm going to stop my instance 2 here. So you cannot do it switchover in both the nodes. You have to stop one instance and you have to make a switchover in only one instance. Right. So command to switchover, command to convert your production database to standby is a simple command. Alter database commit to switchover to standby. Right. So it's getting down. Let it go down, and we can take a couple of questions here. Saurabh is asking, in case of failover, suppose some archives are not applied and there. Yeah, I'm going to cover some failover steps after this session. Stand by on that, Saurabh. Right now, my second instance is down. If I do status again, RAC 12c1 is running on node 1. RAC 12c2 is not running. I purposefully shut down my second instance now. So I'm going to do this particular switchover now. I'll connect back to my database. I can run this alter database commit to switch over to standby. So you can monitor your alert log here. And you can check it in your DR alert log as well. Right. So Majid asking one more question. Active transaction will take a very long time to get completed and also can't kill the sessions. Yeah, so that's why, like this Drdl activities, you cannot do it on fly. It has to be scheduled in coordination between your application team and your network team and your DBA team. And it has to be scheduled downtime for a certain date, and during that time you have to send out a notification to the end users saying that these days we are doing this Drdl activities, and it's expected to see some kind of glitches on this application side, and you have to make sure that the users are not connected during that particular time, and otherwise you have to forcefully kill them, or you have to wait for those transactions to complete. Drdl you can do it anytime, so there's no specific timeline on that. Again, it is based upon your business. If you're running your heavy business on daytime, and probably like nighttime you'll do Drdl activity, or again it depends upon your business what you are running. Right, so it's taking some time. We'll wait for that. Right, so any more queries meantime? Waiting for potential physical standby switchover target to become synchronized. Okay, it is, yeah, as I said, my prod and DR having some network issue. This is expected here. It will take the lag, whatever the lag timing, that will be expected behavior here. Yeah, we'll wait for a few more minutes. Definitely it'll convert. The moment you get this success message, right? Alter database switch over to RAC standby verify. So most of the time, like 99%, I can say your switchover activity should be successful until unless if you have the solid network issue between your prod and DR. Ideally, in industry, you don't see any network issue between your prod and DR. Both should be running most precisely like 10 gig network or 10 gig interface or more than that. So you don't see any potential network issue or network throughput or network bottleneck. Waiting for potential physical. Okay, standby switch to target. Okay, so process suspended due to switchover is physical standby operation. Okay, doing a lot of things here. Right, so you can see here, right, database altered successfully. The moment you do this switchover, you convert your production database to standby database, and your production database will go down. So if you see this alert log, the instance shutdown complete, the instance terminated by this particular PID. So your production database is went down now. So I can just exit, I can connect back. So it will be like idle instance. Right, so that's a successful message. You should get this database altered. That's the clear indication of successful execution of your switchover command. Right, so your switchover done here, and then you can what you can do, you can connect back and your at your DR site, you can verify that switchover status now. Earlier when you ran it, it was like it was not it was in idle state. It is not allowed state. Now if you run the same command, it says that it is to primary. Like you can convert your production database to primary database now. So that's a clear indication now. You can convert your standby database to production database. So now you can do alter database commit to switch over to primary. Come back to your production, your standby side, and run this one. That will convert your standby database to production database. Now I'm going to do alter database commit to switch over to primary. You can start the log shipping anytime at your this old production database. Anyway, that is down. So I'm just going to convert this secondary database to primary. You can see database altered successfully. And the alert log also, you can see this one. Alter database commit to switch over primary. That's successfully altered. Right, so that's the next step. And then you can verify using this alert log. And now you can do alter database open. You can open in any one of the node, or you can open using SRUCTL. Anything like I can simply run this single instance. I can open this particular single instance in open mode. Right, it's opened here. And now you can run the status at your DR site. I can simply exit this one. I can verify the DR status. Both the instances are running here, node 1 and node 2, instance 1 and instance 2, both are running, and your database is in open mode. It will be in primary mode. Now we can go back to that old production database and start in mount mode and start your MRP. So you can go back here. I connect it to your idle instance. I can do startup mount, and then I can start the MRP here. Again, like I'm just starting only one instance. Again, you can do SRUCTL start, and you can start both instances. Either you can start a single instance or one instance, but you're going to start MRP on only one node. The other node will be like just a uses. Other than connecting purpose, you cannot use it for recovery. Alter database recover manage standby database using current log file and disconnect from session. That's you are starting MRP from your new primary to your standby. You can see it in the alert log. It started your log zipping and then other things, right? So next, okay, it'll catch up all your archive logs and other things. Let it capture, and other steps what I have it here. Okay, this concludes your whatever the switchover activity that concludes, and this is like optional step. If you created your guarantee restore point, you can drop all those guarantee restore point and other things. I'm not going to do, because since I have not created guarantee restore point, I'm not going to do this one. And I can quickly verify the log, the open mode and the status of my database. I can run this command here on my production site. This is my new DR. So it is in mounted and which is in physical standby. And the same command, if I run it on my DR site, now it become a primary. So if I run it here, so it's in read write and it's in a primary mode. And if I do some log switch here, let's first verify the log zip. Let's verify the latest archive log what is generated here. So it is 4827, that latest archive log generated at my new production site, and at the DR site it is 4827. It's already applied. And go to that new production site and do some log zipping here. Alter database switch log file. Sorry, alter database switch log file. What happened? Alter database. Sorry, alter system. Sorry for that. There's a typo. My bad. Alter system switch log file. You can do a couple of log switch here, and then you can verify it. Right. So now I can run the same command. Right. So it is a 4831, which is generated at my production site. And if I go to my DR site and run that, 4831, it is already in memory. It is started applying here. So it is already instantly in sync. So you can verify with this alert log as well. In the alert log, if you see this, all the log file, whatever you are generating here in the production site, all those log files are getting sync here in your new DR site. Right, so that's a simple switchover activity. Again, if you want to switch back, the same step you have to follow. Whatever step we followed, you can follow it in the same manner. And I can quickly cover, I can take a couple of questions here, and then I can quickly cover on that failover steps. Okay. Please show how sync prod DR. Okay, Yellappa, like this sync issues, and I can take a new session. We'll probably take a new in the next coming Saturday. We'll simulate the different sync issues between prod and DR, and we'll understand what are the possible cause and how we can make both prod and DR when it is going out of sync. That will take it in the next webinar. How to make both prod and DR in sync, and what are the various scenarios and root cause and all those things. And Praveen is asking, is it mandatory that primary and standby should be in sync for the switcher? Yes, Praveen, like your both prod and DR should be in sync. If it is not in sync, you will see that particular error message, what we saw, right? Like, your both prod and DR, the delay of 300 seconds, it's out of sync. You will not be able to do switchover in case of both are out of sync. Manjunath is asking, do you need to change the config post? What configuration? I think there's no need to do any configuration changes. You are done with your DBA part. Whatever the configuration changes at application side, they have to change their configuration, all those DNS entries and all those things. And if they want to do a network DNS changes, they have to do it from the network side. From the DBA side, whatever we need to do, we are done with switchover steps. Manjunath, is there any missing archive log error? How to recover? Again, this is a different topic, Manjunath. I can cover it different recovery scenarios when your prod and DR goes out of sync. I'm going to cover one more topic on that with the different scenarios and how you can deal with those scenarios. When your archive log destination is full, your DR will go out of sync, how you can sync it. When the password is mismatched, your DR will go out of sync, how you can sync them. And when there's a network gap, it is not going to send out your archive logs, how you can sync it. So different ways and mechanism, I can take it in a new session. New questions, like definitely, like we will take this one in the next session. Definitely, like I'm going to quickly touch base on the failure scenario, right? Let me see it here. Okay, these are like typical failure scenarios. There's only 6 steps in case of failure. Like failure in the sense, you lost your production database completely. Your production database is lost, and you cannot able to run any command at your production site. Whatever command you're going to run, everything on your production site, everything on DR site. So what are those commands you are going to run it at your DR site? One is check the database role and open mode. You can run this particular command. It will say that it's a physical standby and it is a mount mode, your DR database. Because you lost your production database, right? You cannot run any command at your production site. So you are running whatever command at your DR site. When you run that command, this command output, you will see it. It is in mount mode, and it is in a real time apply, or it is in a recovery process, or it's a physical standby, whatever the mode you will get it at your DR site. And you're going to cancel that MRP process running this command, alter database, recover, manage standby database, cancel. Once you cancel that MRP process, you will complete that MRP process. How you can complete that MRP process? Alter database, recover, manage, standby database, finish. The moment you run this finish command, you cannot use that database anymore as a DR database. You are completely stopping your MRP process, and you will never ever start your MRP process. So this is a indication which you are telling to your DR database that you are going to convert that database as a primary database. And then you are converting that standby database into primary using this particular command, alter database active standby database. You can run this particular command, which will convert that standby database to active production database. And then with that, you can see this managed recovery process has been stopped, and then your DR database is completely converted into your production database. These are like very, very important steps. You are going to finish your MRP process. That means you are telling that you are never starting your MRP process back again. And then you are going to convert alter database active standby database. The moment you run this command, these two commands, that will convert your standby database as a primary database. And forcefully you are doing that, converting that primary database to your standby database to primary database in absence of your production database. And then you can simply shut down your database and do startup. It will be in open mode, and it is in a production mode. Right, so these are like simple. The failure is very, very simple. These are the only two commands you have to run it. So there's no need to check your sync status, and there's no need to wait for your sync of production and DR. You can go ahead and simply run this command and this command that will immediately convert your standby as a DR database. Right, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover. I'm going to unmute you guys. Like, you can feel free to ask any questions if you have any further queries. Right, so that's pretty much what I wanted to cover it for this today's topic. If there's no queries or questions, so I can close this session. If you have any queries, you can feel free to unmute yourself.
Sir, I want to ask one thing.
Yes, please.
Do you have any blog link or document to create RAC-to-RAC DataGuard setup?
RAC-to-RAC DataGuard setup, I think I covered last weekend, like around few weeks back. One of the live webinar, I showed you that RAC-to-RAC live DataGuard setup. I think you can refer it in my YouTube channel. You have that live session.
Okay. Is it there in the YouTube video? Yeah.
Yes. And also I said that RAC-to-RAC DR setup document as well, runbook as well. I said in my Telegram group.
Okay. I am a member of your Telegram group and YouTube channel both, so I will find. And
probably I'll share it. I'll share it in our Telegram group once again after this session.
Okay.
Hi sir, Abhishek this side.
Hey, Abhishek.
Sir, just wanted to know that in my environment, I see all the RAC databases are using SP file, and that is in ASM location.
That's correct.
But just out of the curiosity, I was trying to check the that when I shut down the database and when I did startup, so like I don't see any SP file or any init file in the default Oracle Home DBS location. So I got confused that usually we have init ORA file. There we have the SP file location, but I don't see any.
That is not the mandatory. Like, if you configure this sructl config database -d, if you give that RAC database name, and if you configure this SP file location here, you no need to keep any init file or SP file locally under this DBS location. If I go under DBS, and here it is not necessarily you have to keep your init file or SP file here.
Okay.
So if you configure this particular sructl config.
Okay, sir. Understand, sir. Thank you.
Hi, Malik. This is Majid.
Hey, Majid.
Yeah, Malik, what is the recommended way to connect to DR when during the recovery process? Means using the scan IPs or the virtual IPs?
It is both. Your VIPs and scan IP should be up and running. If any one of the IPs is down, if you're not able to connect with the scan IP or the VIP, from your prod to DR, your log shipping will not be happening. For the log ship to happen, your both VIPs and scan IPs should be active. If any one of that down or any one of that not reachable, your log shipping will not happen, because your primary will, what happens, right? Your primary will try to send the archive logs via scan IP as well as via VIP. If the scan IP is not reachable, it will send it via VIP. If the VIP is not reachable, it will send it via scan IPs. It is in the RAC setup, both VIPs and scan IPs should be up and running in order to keep your both and DR and both DR and prod in sync. Both VIPs and scan should be active. If you try to simulate in your RAC, you try to you try to simulate, like disable your scan IPs or disable your VIPs, and the log shipping between your prod and DR will take a longer time. Both should be active, because you cannot control on which network to route your archive logs. Your RAC or your scan internally, your prod and DR, that RFS and archive log process will decide. Randomly it will send it via VIPs and it will send it via your scan IPs. It is recommended or it is mandatory to enable both scan and VIPs in case of both prod and DR.
But in my setup, scan IPs are not working.
If your scan IPs are not working, then your RAC setup will not be working.
But it is able to connect through VIPs.
No, you never say that it's not working. If your scan IPs are not working, then your entire RAC setup will not work. Scan is a mandatory. That's a core of our RAC setup, right? Without scan, our cluster setup itself is not possible. If your production RAC setup to work, the scan is mandatory. Your DR setup to work, scan is mandatory. And on top of scan, the VIPs are like other sub components. But scan is mandatory in case of your RAC setup. Without scan, you cannot run your RAC setup.
But during the failover, the VIPs comes into picture, right?
No, but whatever, like, whether the failovers or whether your application connects, all the connections goes to your scan, and via scan it will go to your VIPs. Here in the log shipping also, whatever the archive log you are going to send it out, everything has to go through your scan IPs, and via scan it has to go through that particular VIPs. And you can try to simulate by setting down your scans or by setting down your VIPs. Your log shipping will happen, but log shipping will happen with very delayed. For example, every time single archive logs your production has to send it out, it will try to send it via scan. If not scan is available, it will send it via VIP. And then there's a lot of log delay between your prod and DR. And your DR will sync up with your production with a delayed time. So that's why you always keep your both scan and VIPs in active mode, both in prod and DR side.
Thank you, Malik.
Right. So any more last questions? If not, we're good to close this today's session.
So I asked a question, but it's not much relevant with the topic. Like I have 11G rack on OEL5, and I want to upgrade and migrate it from OEL5 to OEL7 with the 19C grid infrastructure and DB. So do you have any video or document on this? Did you share anything or?
Okay, so this is two different topics here. One is your OS upgradation and the other one is your database upgradation and the cluster upgradation. I think in my last webinar, live webinar, I think a couple of weeks back, I clearly explained. I took a live session, which is a 2 hours live session. I showed you demo on 2-node Clusterware upgradation from a 12C cluster to 19C Clusterware upgradation. But that is within the same OS, like OL7 to OL7. But in your case, you have to first upgrade your OEL, and then you have to first check it out whether your OEL, like the grid infrastructure, whatever 11G grid infrastructure is supported with your OEL7. If it is supported, then first do your OS upgradation. Once your OS upgradation is done, and then proceed with your Clusterware upgradation. You can refer my one of the videos which talks about Clusterware upgradation. That's a live, same live webinar. I took it a couple of weeks back. 12C to 19C Clusterware upgrade.
Okay. In this case, we will use export import or some RMAN backup for the.
No, you're talking about your Clusterware upgrade or your database upgrade?
Both grid infrastructure and DB. Both.
Yeah, first you have to do your Clusterware upgrade. That's a different GI upgrade. That's a different topic. And then once that is
Okay.
upgrade done, you have to do your database upgrade. Database upgrade you can do with the manual DB upgrade method or DBCA, that's GUI database upgrade assistant, or you can use your
DBUA.
DBUA, or you can use your export import, or even you can use the 19C new feature that is called auto upgrade. You have 4 options. Whatever option you want, you can choose either manual DB upgrade or DBUA or export import, or you can go with your 19C new feature, that's auto upgrade. Or even you can go with a many other approach. You can build your DR and then switch over and failover. But these are the 4 ideal options. You can choose any one of that.
Okay, so as per your suggestion, I have to make 2 new VMs with the OEL7 install in them to fulfill all the prerequisites, then install the grid infrastructure on the 19C.
You try to do the same, whatever the OEL5 server itself, try to upgrade it to OEL7. That's a M upgrade. That will upgrade your OS itself. Whatever the OEL5, it'll upgrade it to OEL7.
Okay.
And then you don't need to install the new servers at all.
Okay. Can you share some MOS document or something for that? Is there?
That OS upgrade is again different topic. That's OS admin activities. But if you want to do it, I can share a couple of documents in our Telegram group. You can refer them.
Okay.
Yeah, just a simple OS upgrade like OEL5 to, you can try to upgrade to OEL6, and from OEL6 to OEL7. And then try to do it, try to check the feasibilities, whether you can able to do in place upgrade or out of place upgrade. That's a completely OS dependent. And then if you're trying to install the new OEL7, 2 new servers and try to install that, try to install the 2 new OEL7 servers and try to set up a new GI 19C GI, and you can directly install the new 11G database here after the setup, and do export import of your 11G database and use the DBUA upgrade. You can upgrade your database.
Okay.
Yeah, there are many approaches, but it's a complex. It's not a straightforward. You have to do it like 3-4 step activity.
Yeah. So that's the thing we should do. So we are get ready for the production. Okay. Thank you very much for your all suggestion and advices. So I will try to follow up, and please share all these documents which I requested earlier, and this one as well in the Telegram.
Sure. Definitely.
Thank you, sir. Thanks.
Fine. All right. Any more questions?
Malik, the last question from my side. Can we smoothly run both the production and the DataGuard on the different patch set levels?
Yeah. There is no difference between your prod and DR. For example, one of the major dependencies, if this particular production is running under U01, okay, I can say 2 different, 19C grid. This is a grid, and U01 19C DB home. So this is your 2 software. You can see it here. This is a Clusterware grid software, and it's a DB software. And here you can see again Clusterware grid software and DB software. If your production is 19C grid, and your DR also should be 19C grid. That's one of the mandatory requirement. And your production database is 19C, and your DR database also should be 19C. The software should be same between your prod and DR. And the patch level may be different. Like you can have it here, a July QFSDP July patch, and you can have it here. October patch. There's no dependency between your GI and database. You can have a GI higher version here and DB lower version here, or you can have a DB higher version patch and GI DB lower version patch. There's no dependency between the patch levels here, but the software should be always the same here. Always GI should be a higher version, or you can have it even your 12C home here, U01 12C and DB home here. Always your GI should be higher or equal to your DB. Your GI should never be lower than your database software. That's the one thing. But the patch level, you can have it any version. There's no dependency here. And same thing goes to your DR site. Here you can go with any patch level. I can have it here Jan patch level, and I can go with this my DR anything like July or any patch level. There's no dependency between your prod and DR. The patch level you can you can apply any patch level. But remember, like Oracle will strictly recommend to have the same patch level between your prod database and the DR database. You can see here like your prod database is in October patch and your DR also should be an October patch. That's a highly recommended. But again, nothing is stopping you. You can have it any patch level.
ASM also, right? ASM will be also in this different.
That's what I told here. Like that's what I told here. Like there's no dependency between your ASM, that's a grid home, or DB home. You can have the grid patch level higher, or you can have the DB patch level higher, or your grid can be lower, or DB can be lower. Anything, any combination is possible. There is no dependency at all. But again, Oracle strongly recommend to keep your grid and DB homes and all your DR site, everything should be same patch level. For example, if you apply October patch at your ASM level here, 19C, and the same October patch at your 19C database, and the same October patch at your 12C database. And the same thing goes to your DR site also. You have to have this October patch and October patch. If you try to decide one patch level, as Oracle releases 4 quarterly patches, Jan, April, October, Jan, April, July, and October. If you decide to apply October patch, you can apply that October patch on your GI home, your 19C database, and 12C database, and your DR GI home or your DR DB home. Everywhere you can apply the same patch level. That's one of the best recommendation. But again, nothing is stopping you. You can apply any patch level. You can have it any of whatever order you want. Right. So if no questions, we are slightly 10 minutes over today's scheduled time, but it's a good session. Fine, then we can see you in next webinar. Thank you, guys.